Yeah, I've received a fair amount of feedback on the instrument cluster I'm making out of carbon fiber. So I thought I would take a moment and show you the materials and the process I'm using to make that instrument cluster so that maybe it could benefit you. Now, I have taken a number of courses from a company called Averus Training. They're out of Reno, Nevada, and they're one of the country's, if not the world's, leading composite training companies. They train Alfa, they train Lamborghini, and they do a lot of work for insurance companies and a lot of aerospace companies, if not almost all the major companies. They are by far the country's leading composite training center. Now, obviously, I don't have the depth of experience that they do, but I have started the training experience. It's just implementing it. I got a ton of projects going on, and I haven't dedicated myself fully to it. So if there's something I know that I can help you with, I'm happy to do it. And hopefully this little video will get you started if you want to try the same thing. So let's check it out. All right, so here we have the 3 of the 4 poles that I made on my mold. So first let's go talk about the mold. Now, my original intent was to make a plastic part. So I made a 2-part silicone mold. I took an instrument cluster, I gutted it, I put a plexiglass back on it, I sanded it down, and I got the form the way I wanted without that bottom row of lights because I'm running aftermarket gauges. So I made this 2-part mold. I was going to pour some plastic into it. The problem is finding the material that would actually fill the mold. It was either too thick and wouldn't actually go down to the bottom portion, or it wouldn't harden up. It didn't have the shore strength that I needed to actually support the weight of the gauges without flexing. So I quickly abandoned the plastic because it is expensive. So I started thinking about it, and I had this mold. I have a lot of composite materials here, so I thought I'd just go ahead and try and use my silicone mold to pull carbon from. Now, I've mentioned in other videos my concern with that, which is the silicone mold doesn't really have a lot of shore strength to it. That's not how the silicone is designed to be used. So I was worried that it would collapse and give because I'm pulling vacuum on it. However, it did pretty good. So let's go ahead and look at the pulls that I did. Here we have just this 1 sheet of fiberglass. The problem you can see here, right there in the corner, is we are very resin rich. There's actually no fabric in there, so there's really not going to be any structural integrity to that. It can chip off very easily. First pull with the composite part. So I was actually pretty ecstatic about that, but I figured, well, if I'm going to get that close on my first attempt, let's go ahead and pull some carbon and see how close we get. So this was my next attempt here. So again, you can see in the edge there, we are very resin rich. Now this, originally when I grabbed it, it was such a loose weave, I just naturally assumed I ordered 4 harness. Not the case. It's actually a very loosely woven plain harness, or plain weave. If you see it there, it is plain weave, but it is extremely flexible. So it's not very tight at all. You know, you compare a weave like that if you look at it. Now let's go over and look at this other weave I have. You can see how close that plain weave is. This material sitting there on that 606 is very stiff. It would not conform to this mold at all. So speaking of that, let's look here. I mentioned the resin rich in the corners, and if we follow it around, also very resin rich. Okay, let's look at this. The next carbon part. This I was very close on. I was actually going to pursue this through to the finish. You can see I started sanding it down, but if we look up top here, I couldn't pull enough vacuum to pull that fabric tight to the mold. You'll see the corners now are not carbon rich or resin rich, but you'll see right there on that lip how we don't have any resin to fill that fabric there and up top. So originally I was going to put some material in there, and I was going to mix up some resin and fill it in. In fact, I started doing that on the top. Right there is a repair. Then I figure I got to repair this thing all the way around. Why not change my process? And we'll go through and we'll pull another part. So what I did, when I took some fabric out, zoom up here to the car, making some car sick here. I pulled out some, I'll call it tow for lack of a better word, and what I did, I'm going to grab a couple pieces of these. Of course, the pieces then were much longer. So on the mold, in the corners now, I went around and I filled in my mold on the edges all the way around so that there was a lot of extra material. I wanted to try to preserve the face of the instrument cluster the best I can with fabric, so I was only worried about the edges at this point. If we looked at all the past pulls, we will see that, you know, the corners are what's resin rich, so that's what I wanted to fill in with the toe. Okay, so let's go look at the latest. Oh, one more thing here. Originally I used this Release Ease. I actually bought this when it came in from my silicone mold making kit. I'm just about out of this though, so I'm going to actually move to Aquanet. All I need is a barrier between my mold and my resin for it to separate. The good thing about this being so pliable is that it separates from the carbon the carbon very easily. So I don't need much of a barrier. Aquanet will work just fine. I don't want to get into any situation where I use PVA or anything like that. I just don't need it. In fact, I don't even know if I need a release at all. So let's go up here and let's look at our latest attempt. By the way, here's AirTac. This is what I use to secure that toe material in the corners of the mold while I was laying it up. Okay, so this is actually 2 layers here. I have a repair going on down here. This is the only portion that I had gaps. So I just mixed up a little bit of extra resin, some epoxy, and I went ahead and put some extra toe material in there and smoothed it out. I'll be able to sand that down just fine. So if we look at the corners now, you'll see it's solid black. That's the extra fabric that I have put in there prior to laying the fabric over. So it sands down just fine. Nobody would ever know. So in general, very happy with this piece. It will be a winner. It will be the final product. I've already had one layer. I cut it down. Probably can't see from the top in the flashlight. It may not be helping as much as I think it is on video. But I cut it down. I made sure the fitment was there, and then I went ahead and added extra layers to make sure that we had the rigidity we need. It is a very solid, very sturdy piece. Very pleased with it. I did take a couple tries, but I think it's going to make a killer instrument cluster. So it will never look like the mass-produced Seabond carbon products, but it is legit carbon. It's not just carbon over a piece of plastic. So hey, if this helps somebody, great. Hey, I want to thank everybody for watching, and have a great Christmas.